Welcome back, friends. Today we are going to be looking at some of the gameplay footage that came out of FarmCon. There's a lot of features that they've announced and a lot of things that look good, and at least a few things, probably more than a few things that look not so good. I will say I think it justifies a new game, but not that we necessarily needed it right now before they could do some more improvements to it. Alright, so starting to go through some of the footage here. They have us driving through, or they are showing driving through the town. This is on the US map. That's the only thing they've really shown off so far is the US map. Now, we'll see it a little bit more in some of the other clips. The buildings do look better. Graphics overall look at least a little bit better. The buildings definitely look a little bit better, look a little bit more 3D. But you can definitely still see that it's, at least in some spots, that it's 2D textures that are just kind of slapped together. You still kind of look in and see some dead space there. I mean, that building looked pretty good that we were just past. That might be... No, that's not the shop I thought that was for a second there. Crops and grass and stuff, though, still definitely look 2D. It is a little bit tough to see it in here. As they go past some of the grass and some of the bushes, though, you see it. I mean, they do, and they've always done a pretty decent job at kind of putting the 2D textures in a bunch of different angles to make it look 3D, but it's definitely not actually 3D models. Same with the trees. It's 2D models, 2D textures that are just kind of stuck together at slightly rounded edges. It still looks pretty jagged when you look close, though, right? But, I mean, you can see the ground looks pretty good. And it is still just painted textures on the ground, right? We're not really getting anything that revolutionary. We will take a look at the ground deformation clip a little bit later, too. It is new, but that's some of the best that I can say about it right now. They really haven't shown much off. You almost see it a little tiny bit there driving past when they drive through that pile of dirt. I don't think that the ground deformation is on, so that might just be that the tire tracks have been redone a little bit as well. So we'll kind of have to wait and see until they come out with a bit more than even what they came out with at FarmCon. You do see animals roaming around in the animal dealer here, which is kind of neat, but again, it's something that really should have already been existing. Especially since that shouldn't, in my opinion, take up too much memory in game, because you really don't need to have anything special with that. It's like a static area, so it should be able to almost be just kind of playing an animation in the area. I could be wrong, and it could be that they'd have to put larger fences so the player can't get into the area, but I would be fine with that. If you can't get in where the animals are at in the animal dealer, and it's just kind of looping a video almost, it would still look better than empty. And it would probably even look a little bit better than the animals, like just 2 or 3 of the animals walking around. If I were to show up in an animal dealer and all they have is like, you know, 4 of each type of animal, I don't think I'd be buying anything. So moving on here to start looking at some of the productions in the buildings and the construction projects, stuff is looking pretty neat on the building side. We do have, like I said, some texture issues where they probably could improve. I mean, just like you saw in the last one, ground kind of repeats. They probably need to make a larger overall texture so that it doesn't look as uniform. Same kind of looking at this silo. I mean, the silo itself does look fantastic, but if we're going to nitpick it, I mean, I'm really nitpicking it here. You do on, like, the wood of the silo just kind of have repeating textures that you can see that are repeating. Same with, like, the metal on that drop and everything. Now we're getting into, this is the barges that they've been showing off, the boats they've been showing off. It's still not sure yet if these are going to be fillable like the trains and drivable, or if this is going to just be a sell point, or what. We really don't know. It would be really neat if we can drive those boats and take them out to sell. It would be a little bit tough of a thing to accomplish, though, if you're talking like the same as the trains, because you'd have to steer them a little bit more, I would think, or else you're going to just be hitting power like on the trains, and it would get pretty boring having to do that if you have to. Now, the buildings themselves and the production points here, it does look like there's more that's enterable than you had originally on FS22. It's kind of similar to Platinum expansion, though, in my opinion. Now, I know you couldn't get into everything on Platinum. Like the old Sawmill, you really weren't getting in anywhere, but you did have a lot more visible that you could see, and you had the open warehouse and things like that. This is kind of reminding me more of that, as well as that big southern sawmill, the big southern sawmill that had the open warehouse that you could go get into and put pallets in and move stuff around in. So it is kind of feeling similar to something in FS22, just not FS22 in base game. We will take a closer look in another clip at those streams, so I'm going to hold off talking about that until then. The logs here are neat, but it looks like it's all static. It doesn't look like those are floating or moving or anything else. So I'm guessing that's just kind of like, you know, the equivalent of rocks being somewhere. It's there to look nice, but you can't interact with it, you can't do anything with it, and they don't seem to have a purpose other than looks. So now we're back to kind of taking a look at the construction buildings here. And this is one of the construction projects that you're going to be able to do. It does seem like this is supposed to be a grain silo or storage silo or something, train silo type of thing, or that it connects up to the boatyard, and you'll have to bring materials to fix it up. And I gotta say, especially with being able to go into it before it's fixed, this looks really cool. You do have spots where you can see it is just 2D textures that are kind of smashed together. You've got really sharp edges on those wood paneling corners and things. And, I mean, in real life, it wouldn't be that clean and neat of an edge as you get on some of them. But you can at least see 3D modeling when they look up in the hole in the roof there. And it's some of the building materials that are laying around on the ground. So it definitely is neat. They have said in some of the interviews too that there are going to be placeable construction projects. So like you can put down houses and who knows, maybe storage silos or something to where you put it wherever you want to and you bring the materials to build it. So that will be a very neat upgrade. I don't know if that's something that they would have been able to do in FS22. That's one of those things where that might have taken changes to the game engine. Now, you can change a game engine and update a game to the new engine. It's been done. It's not like it's impossible or it's a insurmountable feat type of thing, but it would require a very large download and a very large update. Something that could be kind of detrimental to existing players because not everyone has the absolute fastest internet to be able to take a 4 gig, 5 gig, 10 gig update. I have no idea what it would be, but I could see not implementing changes to the game engine and coming out with the new game instead running on the new engine. Now, it is still the Giants engine, don't get me wrong, but they have updated it. Alright, so moving on from our construction building here, which might be a train silo, we get to see some of the other sheds and buildings. And like I said, this is where, if you look at the corners here on the rock building, you see a little bit more of like a 3D modeling. It's not a perfectly clean cut. I'd like to see that a lot more on their buildings. That's something that, especially because all it still really is kind of the way they're meshing the textures together. It would take more time to do on more buildings, but same with the brick building here, right? We see some really kind of bumpier corners as opposed to some of the wood buildings that they've done that it's just a complete clean cut. And I mean, having that little spinning water wheel is a fantastic touch. It looks like it's real. And the smoke coming out. It looks like it's an actual working building. It's something that in a lot of buildings in FS22, they were just flat and static, and it almost looked like it was, you know, a prefab asset that was bought from somewhere. I don't think any of them were, because I don't know how easily that would be to integrate into the Giants engine, and they can pay their designers to build stuff too. Though I suppose they could have used pre-bought assets if they're only paying $100 for a pack of houses or something, or heck, even $1,000 for a pack of buildings. Might be cheaper than paying their designers to build them. I truthfully have no idea on that. But these buildings actually look like they are real buildings. It does look like there's different trees too. I know they've touched on that before, and I gotta say, I kind of really like it. I want to see better trees, especially because, like, at least the oak trees in FS22 have always bothered me. I've grown up around oak trees, and the oak trees around me, at least, are nothing like the ones in FS22. They grow very tall and relatively straight. Now, I know you wouldn't be able to use a harvester on them because the branches are going to be too strong for the harvester to snap off, but the oak trees that were in FS22 were just tiny and spindly. So, taking a look again at a little bit more of the map details, some of the waterways and the boats and stuff here, we're seeing more small boats, so hopefully we'll be able to actually maybe drive some of the boats. That would be amazing. Kind of like some of the mods back in what I think FS19 had some drivable boats. I don't know if any of them were through the Giants mod hub, but I don't think I've seen any for FS22 anywhere. I could be wrong. There could be some PC only ones floating around there that I haven't seen, or that I can't remember offhand, but I don't really think I was seeing any boats. The ground here, the paths, it looks like they took a little bit more time detailing them. Kind of more like some of the mod makers maps. If you compare it to base game Giants maps. Now, that in itself doesn't excite me that much, because that's something that they should have been doing anyways, especially when they're making this small of a map. One of the things that they mentioned in an interview was that they aren't doing larger maps because they don't want to waste time building a larger map. They'd rather put the time into making a more detailed small map. And it does look like that ferry's probably going to be a way that we can cross the river, which would also be kind of neat to hop on the ferry and hire the ferry to take your equipment across. And coming through here again, I mean, this is where you really start to see a lot of, like, the landscape textures and stuff are still very two-dimensional, just meshed together to make them look three-dimensional. And the water here, although it looks nice, it does look good. The water flow looks kind of neat. It looks invisible. You see the white where it's supposed to be kind of like a rapid churning up some bubbles type of thing, but where it's clear, all you see is the texture of the stones underneath the stream there. So I'd really like to see higher quality water in the streams and things. I think this is just because of the way they build their water planes and do the water in the game, that maybe it's just not really doable because they don't actually have water going through there. But I mean, even Gary's mod, which is a almost 20-year-old game, over 20-year-old game at this point, something around there, 20 years, somewhere around there. They have water that you can actually have and use in game that moves. So it should be doable with their streams. And I mean, like, that little boat kind of looked like it was floating over the water, but hopefully that's something that'll get fixed by the time the game actually releases, because this is all still pre-release footage, pre-release beta type of things. Things will change. Alright, we are going to be taking a look at some of the rice planting, the wet rice planting, and the flooding in the field here. I'm a little bit disappointed in this. I was really hoping that it would come out better than what we're kind of seeing with it. So you've probably already seen them talk about it, at least in the pre-FarmCon show. This is more or less the same footage. You get the little saplings out of the greenhouse, which is a cool way of doing it as opposed to just buying it in the store. They did say you can buy it at the store as well, but it just generates pallets like any other greenhouse. If they really wanted to up some things, they should have made it to where you have to go in and dig out the pallets or use another small machine, a skid steer or something, to go in and scoop out your saplings, something to where there's some interaction that's available. Because again, if you don't want to do the interaction, you can always just buy the stuff at the store instead of growing it. So I think they're kind of copping out a little bit by not doing more. I could be hoping for too much, and it could be stuff that the actual game engine couldn't handle, but I mean, I feel like by this point, they should be striving to really make things more interactive and really focus more on gameplay. But I'm kind of starting to think that their biggest thing is that they're just too focused on brand deals with marketing. If you look at the machines, they are highly detailed. And they've talked about that in some videos, that how much work they put into modeling these machines and making sure that you can see lots of little tiny functions. This is something that manufacturers would absolutely love to see when they're talking about doing brand deals with Giants, doing licensing deals. I'm kind of going to just keep calling their brand deals licensing, or their licensing deals brand deals, simply because that's really more of what they are, in my opinion. Now, looking at the rice field here, I kind of get the idea that you're going to have to place the rice fields. You're not going to be going through and doing any sort of digging to make it, because of some of the things they've talked about, and because that water pump looks like it's static to me. And the other big disappointing thing here is it actually looks like it's filling the field backwards. You're seeing the water filling on the far side and then closer when the close side is where your pump is. I also don't like how quick those stages are going. You're not truly filling the field with water. It's kind of just like plowing and everything else is, right? You're painting on different textures. It's just skipping from one texture to another, and it just happens to be that it's a water texture. You're not truly filling the field with water. And again, this is where all you're doing is automatically filling the machine from the pallet. We should be able to fill the machine by hand. I mean, if they really want it to be interactive and realistic, sure, you can keep that autofill button type of thing, just like with the big bags, but why can't you go and pull each of those trays off the pallet by hand and stick them on the machine? I think that would really be something players would like and would be amazed by. But I mean, you can see this machine itself is highly, highly detailed, which is awesome. I mean, we'll see it here in a second. You can see the saplings almost moving out of the trays on the back where it's going and taking them to plant. So, or seedlings. It's probably seedlings, not saplings, but you know, I know in one of the interviews they called it saplings, so now I just keep thinking that way. But you kind of see it actually taking them out. You don't see it perfectly, I think, because of how low detailed all of the crops actually are, that they wouldn't really be able to show you, especially because they're not individual items. You can kind of see it there if you see it when it stops, but it's definitely not perfect for that. But the actual intricacy of the machine, the number of moving parts they have in the model, is phenomenal. And that's probably part of why they are limiting the amount of machines they put in a game. I really still think they should up that, but they are probably trying to create an artificial scarcity and make it more advantageous for manufacturers to jump onto those brand deals faster to get into the program. Because a manufacturer would love being able to see all these intricate little parts working and being able to tell people that it shows them off. And if they run essentially a machine simulator version for customers, you can see all of this happening. The problem is they care more about the machine than anything else in game, right? Because why would they care about the rest of the game? So taking a look at harvesting rice now, I believe with the way the edges of the field bumped up there, I think this is the wet rice. They have shown, oh, that's actually soybeans? Yeah, that's actually a soybean field. I was incorrect there. That at least was showing as being a soybean field. I thought that was a rice field. That's interesting. So maybe we have a new soybean texture, because I don't think that's the existing one by any means. Or their field info was written incorrect and it's just a placeholder. Either way though, again, this machine looks fantastic, right? There's a ton of attention to detail put into this machine and into the way the machine functions. The problem is the crops, especially as they zoom in on the crops, all it is 2D textures going in different directions. We really don't have any sort of high detail put into the actual crops. And in a farming game, I mean, what are we really talking about the game is about? The game is about the ground and the crops, and those seem to be on the low priority end when it comes to graphics in detail. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, unless they're just that focused on their brand deals, because that's making enough money to warrant focusing on that instead of on the game experience and on the customer or the player. And unfortunately, if that's the case, that's really kind of sad. But again, the ground looks kind of lower res than it should to me. Alright, so onto their water physics a little bit more. We saw it a little bit in the clip about the wet rice field, but looking at it here as they're just kind of driving through one of the flooded fields, the water physics look neat. You do have the water reacting to the tractor. Now, I don't know if this is including ground deformation. I kind of don't think it is, because that should affect how the water physics work too. But when you watch it here, it kind of looks like it's almost registering the tires larger, especially like right there. You can see it really well. The tires look like they're being registered as much larger than they are. The water's reacting to a much bigger area than the tire's at. All right, taking a look at their ground deformation and some of their dynamic shadows. It looks good for the shadows, especially. You actually have tractors casting shadows now, and there's been some updates to how tires can look, which is great. Ground deformation, though, it seems a little bit weird, and I really hope to see more soon, because it doesn't seem like it's really doing a ton. We don't know if it's really just kind of a tire track or if it's really deforming the ground to where you'll feel it. So if you cross over the tire or over the deformed ground, is your tractor going to be bumping more because, well, you're dumping into a ditch? All right, so it does look to me like we have a new wheat crop, a new type of wheat probably, because in another video they harvest wheat again and it doesn't look like this. It looks more like what we're used to seeing in FS22. But same thing, these crops look two-dimensional. All they're doing is putting a bunch of 2D textures in different directions to trick it into looking like it's 3D from a distance. But when you look close at the crops, they're 2D textures, which really bugs me. The equipment looks phenomenal. They've put a ton of time and attention and detail into the equipment. Probably just because they're getting paid to do so. Brand manufacturers, equipment manufacturers won't care what the crops look like, but they will care what their machines look like and how they can show off the machine's functioning. It's also going to be kind of the reason why I think that we aren't seeing more things like manual attach, right? Because if Giants went to the far end, and instead of attaching like this, you actually had to go on and tighten down nuts, bolts, screw in hoses, things like that, stuff in the way that you've seen in like Electrician Simulator and PC Builder Simulator, things like that, where you've got to take a wrench and actually screw in nuts and bolts. Or maybe even they give you an impact wrench or something, you have to sit there and hold your impact wrench on it. It's going to make it look like it's harder to attach equipment, right? Being able to just walk up and hit one button, or drive up and hit one button, have it attach it, even though it's really unreal, it makes things look easier. So I don't think manufacturers would care that it seems unreal, because it's going to make it look like it's easier to attach. Especially because if you're making it really accurate as to how you have to attach it, if a manufacturer does make a piece of equipment, whether it's a header or anything going onto a tractor, and it happens to be something that's harder to attach than maybe one of their competitors, they aren't going to want people to see that, right? Because they won't want to admit that their competitor has something better. So this kind of puts them all on an equal playing field and makes it all look better. But like, as detailed as the machine is, if we look at the crops that are getting sucked in by the header right now, they look like they are a really poor resolution. Basically, those 2D textures that are just getting moved look awful compared to how it should. It is neat that we've now got dust coming out the back of it, but why can't we see it better in the front? Taking a look at the new swather here, again, our machine looks phenomenal. Giants has done a fantastic job modeling equipment. I gotta say, their design teams, dev teams, integrators that they have working on putting all of it together, I think have been doing a fantastic job for FS25. We see everything really detailed. Now, the only thing I don't like is we still have screens that just have blank static pictures on them that don't seem to do anything. And it seems like that's been the case for all of the tractors they've shown. Dashboards look like they might be accurate to RPM and speed, but the actual screens are just kind of sitting there. It'd be really nice, and I know a lot of people have said this, it'd be really nice to have those working and working correctly. Now, again, that's kind of a nitpicky thing, because we do have Sim Dashboard and things like that for PC that you can at least make it for yourself to where you have working screens. But it would be really nice to be able to look around in the tractor and see things. It would also give you a reason to look around in the tractor, and I'm sure that manufacturers would love it, because it will be showing off the screens, the equipment, the things their equipment can do. And I really would be interested to see, I hope that we'll see it, who knows if they will or not. Probably won't, because that probably would get integrated more with the AI workers and things. Now that John Deere and some other companies are coming out with essentially AI autopilot and things like that for tractors, that should really be getting integrated into the game. That's something they could probably really get these companies to pay to have put in. I don't know, I mean, I know they're still kind of in early stages, so maybe they wouldn't be willing to yet, especially because they probably would have started to paying for it like a year ago. Maybe we'll see it in some DLC. Maybe we'll start seeing like some autonomous tractors in DLC, or autonomous retrofits onto tractors, so that you can basically have the AI run a tractor without the AI being in the tractor. It would be neat, right? Or being able to just have a tractor set up to go work on the field, and you turn the tractor on and it goes to work on the field, or you click a button on a phone that pops up on your screen instead. That'd be really cool. Now, the one thing about the windrows here, getting back to the topic of this, is they do look a little bit more irregular. I don't know if that's just because of this machine or if it's the crop output or what, but it looks a little bit better than just having a perfectly straight windrow. But it is still really just kind of lackluster 2D textures in different piles. When the game is about the crops, or really largely about the crops, we should be seeing better detail on things like that. I don't know why they can't put 3D textures in that raise up. It might take up a little bit more memory and performance. It shouldn't take a ton. But you can see how massively detailed all of this equipment is. But we have lackluster, undetailed crops. All right, we are getting into some of the really, really cool stuff. So base game is going to have GPS and basically a version of courseplay. So we can see our GPS popping up here, and it is going to let you drive right along the path. I think the way they're doing courseplay, or kind of doing courseplay, is that this GPS just also gets used by the workers. Which means as long as their GPS system works correctly, workers should do a much, much better job in the fields now than they were before. Now, it seems like they haven't finished working the system out yet completely, which does really kind of scare me, because we're getting real close to the launch date on the game, so they should just kind of be finishing up bugs, in my opinion, at this point. Especially because FarmCon, with being a big event like that, takes a lot of work from everybody. So the dev teams and everybody else, especially if there's any of their stuff going into a presentation, probably was pretty darn focused on getting all these clips made, even though they may not have been the ones actually making the clip. But if the person making the clip suddenly has a problem where things aren't working right, now all of the focus will be on getting that fixed for the clip to look correct. So I'm going to assume that they spent a lot of setting up for FarmCon and then being at FarmCon, which means, in my opinion, right now they should probably be in almost more of a bug fixing mode, because if the game's coming out when it is, it's going to have to be in stores before then, which means that you've got to have everything ready to be shipped before then. So yes, you'll have your update at the end, but I mean, really, we should be almost ready, or almost a full game at this point. Moving on to their new bale wrap and net wrap. Now, this is kind of just stealing from a mod from FS25. I am definitely not going to argue that one at all. There was the bale wrap, net wrap add-ons, which got really big on FS22. And I think was available on console too. I didn't really play with it much. I think it was available on console. They have said that you can just kind of auto purchase from the equipment. You don't have to fill it. But this is where I get into another one of my pet peeves with the way Giants is doing things. So I get being able to fill it up right from the pallet with kind of an autofill. It's the same way big bags work to some extent, right? You can just autofill a big bag or a pallet and you don't have to do anything else with it. It's nice and easy, and it makes it really easy to do things. I like that feature. I'm not saying get rid of that feature. Why are our pallets static the way they are? The pallets are so incredibly unrealistic. When you pick up that pallet, nothing falls off of it no matter how you fling it. You can fling it through the air and nothing's going to fall off that pallet, despite the fact that there's no straps or anything else. What I would really like to see is straps on the pallet like was done, or like what was done in an FS22 mod to hold the stuff on, and then being able to pick up by hand, box by box, so that you can fill your equipment. Especially because that would mean if you're starting off and you don't have money for a front loader or anything else, you can still fill your equipment without having to take your equipment to your product, to your net wrap and things. I think the real big reason that they put this in and put the net wrap and bale wrap in is it's another brand deal. Because we've got branded bale wrap there. So I think that the only reason that the bail wrap and net wrap actually got added into this game is because they've got another brand deal and one more way to make money off of FS25 without having to sell the game. And to me, that's really disappointing because, again, we're going to focus on actually having the brand deal to put in this bail wrap, which, don't get me wrong, it's a neat feature. Not something everybody wants. I don't know if we're going to have equipment that doesn't require it. From what they said in an interview, it almost sounds like everything is going to require it, which I would kind of suspect since it's a brand deal, right? If you're from Ranny Wrap and you're going to be paying to have your product put into the game, you don't really want players to be able to opt out of using your product. I mean, that would be kind of silly. Thank you for watching, everybody. Have a great day and happy gaming.